Here's a segment from a recent Gun Talk radio episode. You can listen to all the Gun Talk radio podcasts however you tune in, or check out guntalk.com for more. The more things change, the more they stay the same, and I've been doing this for more than 50 years, covering the Second Amendment fight, and the arguments really do sound familiar. It's like echoes coming down a hall of things I've heard before. One of the great parts of it is that we have some new warriors, if you will, in the Second Amendment fight, people who are seriously working on this and reporting on it and covering it and exposing the lies out there. And one of the ones that is a pleasure for me to bring on the show right now is award-winning journalist Stephen Gutowski of The Reload. Hey, Stephen, how are you?
Hey, Tom, I'm doing well. How are you?
I am great. I mean, you have made some major changes in your life over the last year or so, creating your new product. I don't even know what you call it, media outlet and everything else, The Reload. Why don't you tell people what that is?
Yeah, well, The Reload is an independent, reader-funded publication dedicated to sober, serious reporting and analysis about firearms. And, you know, we have a website people can check out at thereload.com. We have a podcast, not as old as yours, but the Weekly Reload podcast is doing pretty well. We had Forgotten Weapons host Ian McCollum on last week, and we have a Canadian gun rights expert on this week. So we got a lot of good stuff out there.
And you were reporting about guns and gun rights before you created this, and basically, I'm assuming, decided you needed your own outlet so you could do your own thing.
Yeah, you know, I spent almost 7 years at the Free Beacon, the Washington Free Beacon, which was very rewarding, and I did a lot of great work there, and they're wonderful. But it's just an opportunity for more, I think, and that's why, I founded The Reload, because I don't think there's anything else out there quite like it that's dedicated mainly to original news reporting. There's a lot of great gun outlets that focus on reviews or commentary or things like that, but there's not as much in the hard news space. And we know that a lot of the mainstream outlets that cover guns get things wrong constantly. So
yeah.
I suppose there's an opportunity.
And if somebody were to ask me, why would I care? I say, well, what you bring to this, Stephen, is what I would call journalistic vigor. You actively go after the story and you find where it is, even if people will say, well, you really shouldn't be talking about that, or that's not really what we need to be telling people. I say, yeah, but this is the news. This is what's going on. Case in point is you're very good, to excellent reporting and digging of what's going on at the NRA. Congrats on that. Can you bring us up to date? Is there anything new or kind of an overview of that situation?
Yeah, certainly. I do my best to try and tell people the truth about what's going on there, including a lot of times people who work at the NRA. There's a lot of people who work at the NRA subscribe to The Reload. But the latest is, there's actually a board meeting coming up this week. The board still almost entirely supportive of CEO and Executive Vice President Wayne LaPierre. They're currently, we're waiting for news in the New York case against the gun rights group. Obviously, that threatens even their existence. The Attorney General there wants to completely dissolve the organization and seize its assets over the corruption allegations that are fairly well known at this point. And so the NRA tried to go into bankruptcy to avoid it. That didn't work. Now they're going to have to try and fight it out in New York court. And we're waiting to hear. I think the big thing right now is whether or not some of the reformist elements in the NRA, Frank Tate, and a couple of former board members trying to intervene in the case to prevent or to position themselves as sort of an alternative representatives of the NRA membership, as opposed to current leadership like Wayne LaPierre. So we should have a ruling on that in the next couple of months here.
One of the questions I get, probably the most common question I get about the NRA from people, and I'll toss it into you, is why doesn't the board just throw him out? Why doesn't the board fix this? Can't they see the malfeasance and the corruption that's going on? And I know you get the same question. What's your answer?
Sure. Well, the board is complicated, right? One of the things is that the board is very big. There's 76 members, and it's not very well engaged, frankly, as a whole, because take, for instance, the bankruptcy board meeting. When they had an emergency bankruptcy board meeting after the Wayne LaPierre filed it unilaterally without telling the board, they went in and had a meeting to talk about this. And even during that meeting, which is got to be one of the most consequential in the history of the organization, he was just talking about whether or not to go into bankruptcy. Only, the entire board didn't show up. I believe it was somewhere around 50 board members showed up. So that gives you an idea of how engaged most of the board members tend to be.
Only two-thirds even showed up, and then most of them don't speak up. They just sit there and rubber stamp whatever is put in front of them.
Obviously that's the critique of the board that you hear from a lot of people who want reform. Board members themselves would argue that Wayne has done a lot of good for the organization. He raises a lot of money. So any of these scandals that he's been involved with are inconsequential, and they're just being used to attack the organization by its enemies. This is what you hear when you talk to board members who are supportive of Wayne, and I think that's really, that argument is the prevailing viewpoint on the NRA board of the people who are still there. You have to remember, quite a number of people have resigned over the last 2 years. Whether it's Pete Brownell, who's former president, whether it's Dwayne Liptak of Magpul, Ted Nugent. You've had a lot of people leave the board.
Buzz Mills from Gun Talk. Yes, exactly. Good people who looked at it and tried their best, and then finally said, okay, in essence, and my word's not theirs, the fix is in, nothing's going to change. And I will add this, and this is the part that nobody has really peeled back the layers on this enough yet. Maybe this is where you could jump in, is to what extent and exactly how are members of the board financially connected to the NRA in terms of vendor contracts, in terms of consulting deals, in terms of any other deal that they have where they actually, individual members are getting money directly from the NRA, but only, and this is me, only if they are falling in line with Wayne.
Well, there is a disclosure that the NRA puts out every year as to which board members are directly paid by the organization, if it's, for more than $2,000 now. And there have been quite a number of board members on that list, including, very powerful ones and Wayne allies like Marion Hammer, for instance, gets paid hundreds of thousands of dollars each year because she runs the NRA state affiliate in Florida.
An organization of two people in Florida, yeah.
Right. So there's been a lot of people. You've had some weird ones. There are a couple former NFL players who were getting like $100,000 a year for. It wasn't. Sometimes it's not exactly clear what they're being paid for. I believe these guys are getting paid to do fundraisers, which is a little. Obviously, it's a bit odd for a board member at a nonprofit, because the whole idea of a board at a nonprofit is that they raise money for the organization, but things operate a bit differently at the NRA sometimes, and that's one example.
Well, of course, I ended up, I guess my bottom line on all that is Wayne LaPierre is hired help. The board runs the organization, or should, and they should be telling Wayne and the hired help there what they're supposed to do, not the other way around, where Wayne and his core group of cronies comes in and says, this is what we're going to be doing. We're taking a vote now, and basically making sure that there are no dissenting voices. It is completely upside down, and I don't know what your take is. I'm not even going to ask you to put you on the spot here, Stephen, but for years, like 3 years, I've been saying, look, guys, this could absolutely destroy the NRA. And they go, yeah. And I kept saying, you're not hearing me. I'm talking about the organization literally not existing at the end of this thing. And they go, oh, God, Tom, you're just crazy. And now I'm looking at it going, now are you seeing what I'm talking about? It could happen that Letitia James, the AG for New York, could make the NRA go away. That's what we're actually looking at here.
Yeah, well, honestly, that is a real possibility, especially if the judge in this case, and obviously the NRA, this won't be the end of it. They'll have opportunities to appeal and so forth. But if the court system agrees with what you just laid out there as far as the fact that the idea that there's no way to reform the NRA. This is what Letitia James is arguing. There's no way to reform the NRA because all the corruption goes very deep, and so instead you would have to dismantle it. That's what she wants to do. That's what the ask is. Now, I think it's, whether that's the most likely outcome, I think is very debatable, but it is a real possibility.
In the battle for the Second Amendment, we have a lot of advances in courts on Second Amendment issues. Then we have incredible assaults coming our way, primarily from the states. Joe Biden has been an abject failure in the gun ban lobby, is very disappointed in him. We're talking with Stephen Gutowski from The Reload, who reports on all of this, investigates it, and reports on it. And Stephen, I'm just looking at, kind of where we are for 2022, and we're crystal ball gazing. And I guess the big one right now is kind of waiting for the Supreme Court to come down.
Oh, yeah. I definitely think that's going to be the biggest long-term impact of anything that's going to happen this year.
Yep.
Would be my guess. Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball, but the Supreme Court has a very real possibility of not only overturning New York's May issue law along with the other 8 states that currently still have that system for concealed carry permits, but in addition, setting a new standard or sort of reaffirming the Heller standard in more detail to make it more practical for application at lower level courts. And so that would be huge. The second part of that, the standard part,
yes,
would be a big thing. And if they don't do it, that's another big thing.
Well, that's right. It depends on how narrowly they want to tailor it. One of the things that, we kind of got you got keep and bear arms. We had the keep part in the Heller decision, and this gives a chance for the court to say, and we meant it when we said bear arms, which means to carry them around. You can't force people to say, I have a good enough reason to exercise my Second Amendment right or my constitutional rights. This is not a mother may I system. And that's what we're hoping for, but probably looking at late spring before we get a decision on this.
Yeah, probably. Maybe around by June.
Yep,
I'd expect
exactly.
one. I think it'll be, all signs point to them striking down the law, probably upholding the permitting system generally, at least for now, especially given the nature of the court and how the Roberts Court is preferred to often use more incremental approaches. So they're probably not going to wipe out the permitting system altogether.
Right. But they probably will do away with the whole May issue, or you must show good cause before somebody exercises their discretion allows you to exercise a fundamental right. Yeah,
that certainly seemed to be where the justices were heading in oral argument, even Roberts. And actually Roberts even expressed maybe some skepticism of permitting at all.
Surprised me.
Really interesting.
Yeah, I was surprised at that. Roberts was coming down on the side of the more conservative viewpoint on that. We'll see what happens. But really, a lot of the assaults right now are coming from the states. Obviously, Gavin Newsom and what they're doing out there. Of course, all that does really is give the Second Amendment warriors out there a chance to challenge it in court and push all that eventually toward the Supreme Court, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, I think. Because my guess is that's another reason, another way that the Supreme Court's ruling in Bruin is going to be a big deal, because if they do set a standard and they show that they're going to be actively sort of defending their standard in the Second Amendment litigation from now on, that's when you'd expect to see a lot more minimization tactics from the gun control advocates, because you'll see things like, if you remember in D.C. with Wren, D.C. didn't appeal when they lost at the circuit level to the Supreme Court because they were afraid they would lose,
right?
And that would affect the whole country. And so, I would imagine you start to see more stuff like that happen, and you start to see lower court judges ruling in favor of gun rights plaintiffs, but narrowly, so that they have to go more or less through the whole process again, and it doesn't make it to the court. That's probably how they'll start to deal with it if the Supreme Court does take a strong stand.
And that's how it should be, with the Supreme Court basically telling lower courts, we mean this, don't do this, or you're going to get overturned. And so the lower courts are going, yeah, well, I better not do it that way. I'd like to, but the law actually doesn't allow me to, and the Supreme Court will, in fact, slap me down if I do this. And that's kind of what we're hoping for.
Yeah, I think certainly that's what gun rights advocates have been looking for since Heller was decided. And it just kind of hasn't happened until now. But, I mean, the courts move slow. That's just the nature of it.
It is. And, for those who, look, I know people split a lot of different ways on Donald Trump, and I do too. And, was never a huge fan of his. But I will say this, he gave us 3 Supreme Court justices, which is going to give us probably 20 years of change there, or at least until Thomas retires. We'll see what happens there. But at least for the time being, and it's one of the reasons we're pushing as many cases as we can toward the Supreme Court while we have this particular makeup.
Yeah, certainly it's undeniable the impact that the Supreme Court justices that Trump appointed are going to have.
What else do you see as you look at it and somebody says, what's going to happen this year? Where are you looking to see action?
Yeah, I think the state level is exactly right in terms of where things are going to actually move, because you're very likely to see Republicans take control of at least one house of Congress, and gun control was already not moving through Congress anyway. But you'll probably see a lot of states go for, I think there's 2 policies. We had a contributing writer, Jake Fogelman at The Reload, wrote up how preemption laws are likely to move.
Hey Stephen, Stephen, I drove you into a box canyon. I apologize for that. I'm going to be out of time. But you gave us the perfect lead-in. If people want to know what else is going to be happening, they need to subscribe to The Reload, right?
Yeah. Yep. Preemption laws and ghost gun bans. That's going to be big in 2020.
You can get all the details there at thereload.com. It is a great source. If you're into this, you need to be there. Stephen, thank you for what you're doing, man.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
You betcha. You take care.